Good afternoon. It is Wednesday, October 7th, 2009. Today I want to go over a few brief disconnected items that have been in the news the last couple days. The first is on the United States Supreme Court. Now, some of you may know the Supreme Court recently began their new session with the new Justice Sotomayor. And a few of the cases that they're deciding include one on a cross that was on public ground and was ordered to be removed, but it wasn't removed. It was boarded up instead, and some people are upset about that. And then another one about videotaping dogfighting, I think, or something like that. Whatever. I mean, it's led me to a conclusion that I arrived at a long time ago, actually, that the Supreme Court is an irrelevant body in the United States of America. The Supreme Court no longer decides on the real constitutional issues, right? Now, don't get me wrong, I mean, these cases might have a place in the Supreme Court, but there are so many other, more pressing constitutional issues that the Supreme Court should be deciding than this. I mean, it's a little ridiculous, if you ask me. For example, we're fighting two wars right now with no declaration from Congress. We have a Patriot Act that blatantly violates the Constitution. We have a No Child Left Behind program that violates the 10th Amendment. In fact, the 10th Amendment isn't even recognized as a legitimate part of the Constitution anymore. It's just ignored. Congress doesn't even bother looking at the Constitution anymore. We have an executive branch that has far exceeded the powers that were delegated to it by the Constitution. All right? Not only under this presidency, but the presidencies before it. We have a war on drugs that is completely unconstitutional. I mean, you think the writers of the Constitution wanted the federal government to come into an individual state and lock up people for smoking marijuana? I mean, of course not. I mean, for that to be a federal law, we would need a constitutional amendment like we had with Prohibition in the 1920s. Now, I'm not suggesting that. What I am saying, though, is that it's unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court won't hear it. So, you know, while the Supreme Court is hearing this case about a boarded-up cross that's in the middle of nowhere that nobody even sees to begin with, you know, we're doing all these other unconstitutional things that they should be deciding instead. So like I said, I mean, the Supreme Court doesn't even matter in the 21st century. It hardly constitutes a check on executive and legislative power. Let's just say that. I mean, we really don't even have checks and balances anymore in the United States. At least not in the way that the founders envisioned. Anyway, that's my thoughts on that. And, you know, I will give the Supreme Court credit, though. Last year, I believe, they overturned the D.C. gun ban, finally deciding something of constitutional importance. But I mean, that's an exception. For the most part, they've been deciding these petty social issues that some people care about, but I'm willing to say the majority of Americans really don't care about most of these issues, and would rather have the Supreme Court decide on the real constitutional issues. So anyway, moving on past that to the economy. As some of you may have heard, gold has been doing very well the last couple of days. It's shot up to about $1,050 an ounce, I believe, which is an all-time high for gold. And why is this happening? Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve has printed an unprecedented amount of dollars in over the last year or two. I mean, they've really been firing up that printing press. Or in some cases, as they've admitted to the public, they'll just add a zero to the end of a bank account of a favored banker or whoever. So the Fed's been doing that, which leads to inflation. And anytime you have inflation fears, gold is going to do well. So you have that. And then there was a rumor yesterday that some Arab nations, and I believe China and Russia were talking in secret about trading in oil outside of the U.S. dollar, just completely going around it and not using it. That report came out and gold shot up in price. I believe they later denied it, but we are moving in that direction. The UN also called for the world to move on past having the dollar as a reserve currency. So what are we seeing right now? We're seeing the decline of the US dollar. And it's happening. I mean, it's a gradual process. It's not happening all at once. But notice throughout this year, you know, they've been saying, oh, this has been a recovery. Well, I mean, the dollar has been getting weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And it's really, it's the pace of that decline has accelerated, especially in the last month. And that's caused gold to go up. It's caused silver to go up. Silver is at about $17.50 right now an ounce. So what do we do in this situation? Well, I would say, you know, you need to get your savings out of dollars. If you're holding cash right now, you're nuts. I mean, that is not the thing to be doing. I would either invest in precious metals, gold or silver, or invest outside of the United States. I would invest in China and some of the Brazil, some of the developing countries that are ironically more capitalist than we are today, in many respects. So, I mean, who knows what's going to happen? It's not really a question of if we're going to get inflation. The question is, when are we going to get inflation, and how big is it going to be? Is it going to be 70s style inflation, or is it going to be hyperinflation on the scale of the Weimar Republic? Personally, I think it's going to be somewhere in between that, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I mean, inflation happens anyway at about 2% a year. I wouldn't be surprised to see it go up to 8% to 10% very shortly, and possibly more than that. If the world starts dumping the dollar. Remember, our current dollar is paper, and it's not based on anything solid except for, quote, the good faith and credit of the United States. Well, right now the United States does not have good credit. I don't know if somebody has told you this, but we're $12 trillion in debt. That's not good credit. And the world doesn't have much faith in us as an economic power. So the dollar, in other words, is in deep trouble. I would get out if I were you. You heard it here, and before me you heard it from Ron Paul and Peter Schiff, who predicted this a long time ago. So don't be surprised when it comes, and be prepared for it, because it will come. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Next week I would like to start a series on the Federal Reserve. I know I bring it up every now and then, but I haven't gone into a whole lot of detail about it. I haven't done a comprehensive blog on it, and I would like to do that soon. So anyway, stay tuned for that, and I will see you guys later.